I am, but I really appreciate you joining me today. I'm Julie Jones. I am going to walk you through a few things that you can use with your athletes on awareness and focus. And my background, simply, if you haven't been on one of my calls before, I spent 26 years as a Division I softball coach. I was a head coach at Cleveland State for 10 years, and then I was a head coach at the University of Akron for 13 years, and 3 years, obviously, I was an assistant. I also was a compliance person, so I have some administrative background. But now I spend my time researching and working with teams and coaches and different athletes on mental performance, something we used at both places. I had the benefit of having a great sports psychologist when I was at Cleveland State, so we used it more often then. And as I mentioned, if you were on my call before, we didn't use it as consistently as we should have, like most people don't. And most times we used it in times of crisis as opposed to prep and doing some of the things that I'm going to suggest today. But today, because of where we are, and all of the upheaval that you all are living in, I guess we all are, but really for you guys, I don't envy coaches, administrators, or anyone at this point, or teachers or superintendents, but the world is in constant change. We don't like change, our brains don't like change, and when we are in states of change, we don't always make the best decisions, and we definitely have more of a tendency to lose our focus and our ability to concentrate on what's important. So we're going to talk today about a few little things you can do to help your athletes, whether they're at home, whether you are able to work out with them fully, or whatever. These little exercises you can do remotely, or when they get back to campus, when they're there for 3 weeks and they send us all home again, probably, which is my prediction. So you guys can take the up or down on that, and we can bet on that later, but because it's not an NCAA sport, so we're good, right? But where, when, and how do we begin? All of this, anything we do mentally has to start with awareness, just like any issue, right? Any scientific problem has to start with what is the problem, or what we need to be aware. So if you were on with me before, we talked about our brain and how researchers have called our brain the elephant in the rider. We know we have these two parts of our brain, the conscious and the subconscious, right? The subconscious is our elephant. It weighs 6 tons. We have to try to direct it. It will always win. It sees things as wholes. It doesn't break things down. It's our energy. It's our motivation. It's good in a lot of ways. It's bad in other ways, right? Then we have our rider, which for me is 130 pounds. Very hard sometimes to direct the emotional side of me. It's the rational part of our brain, the thinking brain. It sees things in parts. It helps us plan. It gives direction. So we have to figure out how we can take advantage of both sides of our brains, and we need to let our athletes understand that they have, in order to change, in order to focus, in order to perform better, they do have control over these things. We just have to give them tools in order for them to sort of circumvent some of the frustrating aspects of our mind, right? So we have to direct the rider. We have to give directions. We have to motivate the elephant, because if we don't have motivation, we're not going anywhere, right? Lots of times our emotion is what drives us, and that's a positive thing, but we have to keep it under control. And then we have to shape the path. We have to make the path as easy as possible for us to be successful. So today, some of the things that we're going to talk about are in that part, really shaping the path. We're also going to be talking about sort of directing the rider as well. Some of you have probably heard of in the past your reticular activating system. What this is like a bunch of neurons in the back of your brainstem that basically filter out all of the things that come at us every single day. So it allows certain things to come in based on your biases, what you like, those kinds of things, and it filters other things out. Without this, we would be just inundated. There are about 14 million things that come our way at a time, and we have to be able to filter out what's important and what's not. So how in the world, if we've got 14 million things coming at us, how do we break down and focus? That's the question. But what this reticular activating system does is it basically works as our attention. It helps us focus. So this is a mental process that prevents us from getting overloaded. It lets in certain stimuli and inhibits others from entering. So we want to be able to activate this in the way that's positive. If we're talking about what we focus on, this RAS system basically brings in the things that we're looking for. For instance, I love ice cream. I'm sure a lot of you do too. There used to be a Baskin-Robbins by our old house. We used to walk there all the time. And I never really realized that they have 31 flavors and it's telling me right here, right? In the B and the R, there's a 31. Now all I can see is the 31. I don't even really see the Baskin-Robbins. So we put our attention on certain things. And then once we see something, we really can't not see it. You understand that. For instance, I buy a new car and now I see it everywhere, right? We have moved our focus, we withdraw our focus from certain things in order to deal with other things effectively. So now all of a sudden I go down the road and I see my car everywhere. Oh my gosh, everybody has it. So, but before that, it wasn't interesting to me. I didn't pay attention to it. So how do we use these parts of our brains to help us focus on the court, on the field, whatever we're doing athletically, to stay engaged, stay where we need to be, to block out the stuff that we don't need at the time and let in the things that we do need at the time. You deal with this all the time, I'm sure. There are parents out there. When I was coaching softball, I saw a guy behind me giving signals. I could see his shadow behind me, moving my outfielders at one point. That's the stuff we don't want our kids to see, right? We want them to listen to us and go with what they've been trained to do. So how do we train them to stay focused? A lot of what they're fighting is on the inside, not just on the outside. So we'll talk about that. Where our attention goes, the rest of our brain follows. So our attention goes someplace and our body ends up following it, right? Because our brain is directing our body. And what we know is we don't need more time. We need more practiced focus attention. You can improve your focus by practice. Here's one thing that we know through research, that unless something is deliberately rehearsed, it will be lost forever in 15 to 30 seconds. Here's a perfect example. Everyone can call you coach, right? I spent the majority of my life being called coach, and no one had to know my name, but you meet a million people. I couldn't remember anybody's name. So literally I had to put in a system to rehearse someone's name, or it's gone, right? Gone before it even gets in. So the bottom line is that we have to figure out what we need to be focusing on, and then practice deliberately, letting our kids understand that focus is a deliberate decision, So we want to make sure that they understand that, yes, all these things are out there. All these things can draw our attention. What's going on with COVID? What's going on culturally? What's going on when we get back to campus? You have to be 6 feet away. You have to wear your mask. You have to do all these things. They can still focus on what is at hand and relevant if we train them to do so. Basically, our focus is a mental spotlight. If we think of it as an analogy of a mental spotlight, that we are always focused on something, right? And we can always change the direction or the width of our mental beam. So it's not that, that we're not focused, it's that we're sometimes focused on the wrong thing. Our focus changes. We're always focused. We're either focused on something under our control, right? Or something that's the wrong target. But what we really understand is that when we start to focus on the wrong target, it normally is because we're focusing inward. And normally when we focus inward, we're focusing on things that happened in the past, someone who made me mad, the referee's call and how that made me feel. So we focused on that for a second, and now we're focused on our emotion, right? And but we have considerable control over what we pay attention to, right? Studies show those who focus on things that, I'm going to go back here just so I don't get ahead of myself. Studies show that people who focus on things that are outside of them perform better than people who focus on things inside of them. Because most of the things that go inside of us fall right to our negativity bias, right? We see the red light before we see the green light. We see the problem before we see the solution. We see what's wrong with us before we see what's going right. So we want to make sure that we are talking to our student athletes about focusing on the task at hand, what's relevant, what's specific, what we can control. And I've got an exercise for you here that we're going to do in a couple minutes, but this is the whole idea. When we focus on the inside, it's usually not good. When we focus on the outside, we're going to be more successful. Research also shows that about 47% of the time our mind wanders. Wow. Wow. 40%, 47% of our mind wanders. I'd like to make a prediction about you right now. The prediction is that you'll be unaware of what I'm saying for about 4 of the next 8 minutes, right? So you're going to really have to pay attention. That's what research says. Why is this important that we understand that? Well, mind wandering happens for a reason. We don't want to get too involved in a task, or we didn't back in days before our life was this comfortable, because if you were too involved in attack, you could get attacked by something. Here comes the lion, right? You were so involved in your task, you didn't see it coming, now you're dead. Our brain's number one goal is survival. So that mind wandering still happens to protect us. So we want to make sure that we can circumvent that by practicing getting back to the present, to the present, to the present, so that today doesn't look like yesterday, right? We want to be better than yesterday. We've got to get out of the survival mode and into the performance mode. When we focus inward, we get that snowball effect too. We think, oh, this isn't going to go right. This is what happened the last time, all these things. So we turn into the snowball effect, and now we've totally lost focus, and we've also lost emotional and physical control. Because again, where our attention is, our brain and our body follow. So we want to make sure that we're not getting into the snowball effect of the inward negativity bias situation that goes on inside of us, and we don't even realize it's going on, but we can circumvent that some. So where's your attention? Is your attention going to be for the next 8 minutes somewhere else? Or do you have the ability to bring yourself back as your mind wanders? How important is focus? I would say that it's extremely important, particularly when you're on the operating table, right? We don't want our military leaders, we don't want our doctors to be off 4 minutes out of 8 wandering around in their mind, right? We don't want our kids, when they're driving, to be wandering around in their mind and not paying attention to what's going on, which if you have a teenager, I'm sure that's a worry that you have every single day. So how do we do these how do we get our mind back in focus? As you know, as a coach, the last minute, it seems, they score a goal, right? The most mistakes happen at the end of the game when we're tired or stressed. The most accidents happen within, I think the research says, 5 miles from our home, because we're sort of on autopilot then. We're not really paying attention to the things that help us avoid accidents. We're not paying attention to the things that help us keep the ball out of the goal, because we either have gone into an automatic mode, which is the mind wandering mode, or because we're tired and stressed. Those two things both inhibit our ability to focus. So we miss critical information. We make mistakes when we're allowing our mind to wander, and we don't have a tool for bringing it back. We want to make sure that we are focused on a target, always. Sometimes it does have to be internal, but most times we want it to be outside of us. So here's the question. How well do you focus, and can you improve it? Here's a simple tool that you can use with your team. And I'm sure you've seen them before, but you can find these on the web, and I have a website on the next slide that you can go to, and they can actually do it on the web. You don't even have to have like a board where you can wipe it off, which is one way to do it. Or you can just obviously print out a whole bunch of them. But these increase the ability for you to focus. They help build self-regulation and the ability to stay calm. So we want to time these. They improve your concentration. They also develop awareness of when your mind starts to wander. If you put a concentration grid in front of one of your kids, whether it's online or on a piece of paper or on a laminated thing that you can then wipe off, and someone else, the next kid that comes to the station, can use, and you put a timer on it, you can have them also tally when their mind wandered, right? So I'm looking for 0, then I'm looking for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way up to 99. And there are a couple ways you can do it. You can set a timer, right? You can use 15 seconds, see how many they can get. You can do 2 minutes, see how many they can get in order of 0 to 99. When the timer goes off, you chart their progress, right? Or you can have them go 0 to 99 and see how long it takes them all the way through. And then once they can do it under 5 minutes, you start to add distractions. A great distraction is, having someone talk to them, playing music, anything that might, having someone walk, I don't know if you have ever taught a class in a room that has a window, right? Every time somebody walks by, everybody has to look, see who it is, right? How hard is it for us not to be distracted from what we're doing? But the one thing that you can do to get them to sort of pay attention to their mind wandering, or to their frustration, or to their stress because they're being timed, anything, like we ran a time mile at Akron and at Cleveland State. You would have thought I was asking everyone to, I don't know, build the Taj Mahal, right? They had to run it in 8 minutes or less. And I had people calling me at 4 o'clock in the morning because they were so stressed out that they couldn't do it. One of them is now a doctor. But the bottom line is that anytime something is timed, it increases our stress. And when we increase our stress, we have a tendency to lose our focus. So putting a timer on this makes all the difference in the world. But having them keep a tally of how many times they wandered off, or how many times they felt distress, or how many times they got distracted, will also get them to realize how easy it is for them to lose focus. But then they also can learn the fact that they can regain focus pretty easily too, by just noting the fact that, oh, hey, I'm not paying attention to what I need to do. Every time they make note of the fact that their brain has wandered off and they bring it back, they are building a pathway in their brain to get them to understand that refocusing is possible. And they get better and better and better at it. It just takes practice. It's like building that mental muscle of, hey, I wandered away and now I'm back. I'm wandered away and now I'm back. And the more they do that, the more quickly they'll be able to recover from a distraction. So there is a very simple exercise that you can use. Another one, and we won't get into this in total detail, but a pre-practice or a pre-performance routine is very important. We've got to be able to switch from student, from whatever they are, from intern, whatever they are prior to practice, into that switch, I'm an athlete mode now. We've got to get them to understand that during this time, and you're going to practice for 2 hours, there's no way you're going to focus for 2 full hours. And that's okay. Nobody can, right? We've got to do the hard stuff at the beginning while we have a little bit more attention and we're not quite as tired. Or some days we do the hard stuff at the end. So we practice that stress stuff, right? This is what you do as coaches. You are challenging. Or we would run around the track and then come back and hit the ball at the tee because our heart rate's up. We've got to figure out how to get ourselves back in control, right? So we are trying to manufacture the stress that happens in games in practice. Well, it's the same thing here. We've got to make sure that we are making that switch, even in practice, to get to the point where we understand that that mental focus has to change, right? Maybe I mind wandered in class, and then all of a sudden the professor called on me. I'm like, oh crap, I wasn't paying attention. But there's really not as big a consequence to that as when someone scores on you, or the ball gets past you, or whatever it might be. In your own mind as an athlete, that's probably more detrimental to them. We've got to get them to, prior to the act of needing to perform, we have to get them to focus on what's relevant, what's specific, and what's under our control, right? So they can write out the ABCs. So the first thing I do is A, the second thing I do is B, the third thing I do is C. So a quarterback, looks for the safeties, it's under the, I don't know football, but we'll pretend I do for a second. He gets the snap and then he drops back in his two-step drop or whatever he's going to do, right? The pitcher gets the sign from whoever she gets it from. She puts her hands together and then she moves, right? So whatever her steps are, those need to be concrete and ritualistic so that the attention can stay where it needs to stay, right? Maybe they take a deep breath and they have a focal point. Maybe they have a trigger word that every time they start to wander, right? In softball, this happens all the time. We've got a lot of dead time in softball, right? You may not get a ball for a whole game. And anybody who's recruiting knows that, because you go watch a kid and they get one ball, and during that time, some parent took your attention away. You don't even get to see them, right? That happened to me 1,000,000 times over my recruiting time. But maybe they have a trigger word that gets them back in when they were making those tallies on their concentration grid. They have a trigger word that gets back to focus, whatever that might be. So these are a little bit, obviously if I had time with you, we could go through the exact steps on how to lay all this out. And if you're interested in that, I'd be more than happy to have a discussion. But a pre-practice, a pre-performance routine, having scripted things helps focus and concentration. Having go-to words when we know that we get distracted brings us right back. But they have to practice them and practice before they can use them in a game. It just doesn't happen. To the same slides. Here, this is something I'm sure you've seen a million times. What can I control? What can I control? What am I going to focus on? Right? We want to try to have our athletes really determine what they can control and not focus on what they can't control. What I encourage you, the difference in this, the only little difference that I'm encouraging you to do is do a sporadic email check-in one day, a week maybe, once every other week. Ask them to rate how they did today, right? With what they were supposed to focus on. Did they focus on what they could control? Did they focus on what they couldn't control? And then have them write a little tiny couple sentence summary of how things went for them, right? So you've seen this before. What can I control? What can I control? We've all done that with our athletes. That's nothing new. Thanks, coach, great. But what I never did, and what I think that could make this much more effective, is ask them. They can rank on a scale of 1 to 5 if you want it to be simple. How well did I control what I could control today? Right? So you could do this at the end of practice. You could have, what can I control? What can I control in my day, in my practice, in my schoolwork, whatever it might be, but just getting them to focus on those things and then practice focusing only on what they can control, and then evaluating how well they did. You know that if you don't measure something, it doesn't matter. This is a way to sort of measure very simply by either having them write out a little summary or rank on a scale of 1 to 5. Here's what I controlled. I did well, I did crappy. So just a little check-in that you can do with them that will add a little bit of a opportunity for them to really understand that when I'm focusing on when I'm thinking I'm getting into that snowball, it's not good for me. I don't perform well. When I am focusing on executing, when I'm focusing on my ABCs, my pre-performance routine, my trigger words, I'm good to go. So laying it out, showing them in black and white may be helpful for some. The last little tool that we're going to talk about is a focused attention meditation. Now, I am not a one of those people that's like all like into, like I'm totally into mindfulness, but not like totally into mindfulness, like, yes, it's the cure all be all. But this, sitting and thinking about one thing and then noticing that our brain is going somewhere else and then bringing our brain back affects how well and how quickly we can refocus. So if we want our athletes to be able to refocus on it in a effective and quick manner, this is an exercise that we can do. And I'm going to have you do it here just for a second. I want you to just get settled, your eyes comfortably lowered or closed, just sort of settle yourself in, okay? I want you to focus on the sensation that's most prominent to you that's tied to your breathing. So it may be the cool air coming in, it may be your body relaxing as you exhale, whatever it might be your abdomen moving in or out, your shoulders, whatever. But I want you to focus on this for a period of time in this little form of practice, okay? So once you've selected your focus, I want you now to commit to maintaining your attention there. Okay, so I want you to pay attention to that, whether it's the breathing in and the cool air, whether it's your stomach, whether it's your chest relaxing, your shoulders relaxing, okay? And then I want you to notice every time your mind wanders away, all right? Notice when there might be thoughts or sensations, memories that arise that aren't about your breath at all. Maybe you're thinking, oh my gosh, I can't believe I spent 30 minutes listening to this webinar, right? I have other things to do. Whatever it might be, that simply then return your thoughts back to the breath-related sensations, okay? So just sit there. I'm going to give you 30 seconds. And I want you to just pay attention to just whatever you chose with your breathing. I don't know about you, but even 30 seconds at times is difficult to just focus on one specific thing when you're trying to quiet your mind, right? So if we can't even sit in the quiet of our home, I do deep breathing in my inversion table after I work out in the mornings. I try to breathe in, pretend like I'm filling my body with red blood cells and oxygen, and flushing all of the lactic acid that I just build up out. This is all my sort of my mental exercise that I do. And I'm upside down, and then I start to think about the emails I need to return. I start to think about all the other things, and all I want to do for a minute is think about my breathing. And it's rare, quite frankly, even though I try to do it every day, it's rare that I can extend that for all that time. But what I didn't realize when I first started doing that quite a while ago was that every time I worked hard to bring my mind wandering back in, I was doing myself a favor, because I was learning how to focus more quickly. So I was learning in a short period of time then how to get back and pay attention to what I needed to pay attention on. So we need to focus and concentrate on one thing. This is something you do literally for 2 minutes with your athletes. Have them lay down, have them sit down, whatever it might be, and have them focus on their breath. And they can have a tally sheet there too. They did a study where they had someone hit a button every time they mind wandered, and then they looked at what their brain was doing at the time. And the longer they did it, the more their brain changed to get them back into the focused area that they needed to be in. It happened quicker as they went. So your attention, you pay attention, you fade away, you come back. That is focus practice. It's that simple. A focused practice that is that simple. It sounds almost ridiculously simple, but the brain, you can keep it this simple. You could do a five in, like you're making a box, 5 seconds across the box, 5 seconds hold your breath, 5 seconds down. With your exhale, 5 seconds up when you're holding. So you're exhaling across the top of the box. You're holding your breath for 5 seconds as you go down the side of the box. You're exhaling your breath at the bottom of the box for 5 seconds, and you're holding your breath. And you can think about how many times your mind wanders when you're not paying attention to the box that you're drawing, you're not paying attention to the breath, you're not paying attention to whatever it could be. You could just make it very, very simple, or just have them sit there for 2 minutes and focus on their breath with no box, no imagery, no nothing. Simple. But the deep breathing reduces blood to the elephant, the emotional side, okay? So you're paying attention to your breathing, you're learning how to control your breathing all at the same time when you're working on your focus, right? And it lets that prefrontal cortex, the rider, the decision maker, take over. So this is something they could do right on the court, on the field. Every time they take a deep breath, they're allowing their brain to function better for direction. So just something to think about there. This practice gives us the power to move from those non-productive thoughts to productive thoughts. So as soon as we start to mind wander into that negative, we can quickly drop it. The more we practice, we quickly drop the negative thought and we get back to where we need to be. So the more we practice, the more power we have to think positively, to think performance-minded, to have that championship or stronger, smarter, stronger, better mindset. It's that simple, and it's proven. We get to decide whether we're the victim or the victor, right? We have to take control. We can either float away and think about all the things that can go wrong, or we can practice getting right back to the subject at hand. Our brains fire faster and faster the more we use them. That's called neuroplasty, right? In cognitive strategies to make positive thoughts and have positive thinking, if we focus on controlling our attention, we can improve our performance, and we can stop anxiety before and during competition, right? Anxiety is something that we produce inside of us. If we aren't lingering there and we're getting back to the relevant, specific, and control, then there's less likely for it to happen. The most valuable skill or talent you could ever develop is that of directing your thoughts toward what you want. Mind wandering takes us away. We know it's an important thing. We don't want to get too involved. We don't want to get hit by a bus when we're running down the street, but we have to be able to control it and bring it back in order for us to perform to the best of our ability. All of these things, the concentration grid, the pre-performance routine, the what can I control, what can I control, and the little check-in with that, and then this focused meditation with just focusing on our breathing, these help us direct the path of our brain. They help us direct the path of our performance. So you need to ask your athletes, where's your focus? Then you need to track it. You need to record it. You need to practice it. And then they'll improve it. Eventually we get to see what we need to see, right? We're seeing the 31 flavors that Baskin-Robbins had. We'll never not see it again, right? But we have to have habits to support those things, to be able to see and be where we need to be. These little drills, all of them will take, I don't know, 3 to 5 minutes max. You can institute them whether when you're with your student athletes or when you're not. And I think they can all be effective in helping them control their focus and be aware of when they need to be making a little bit of change in where their mind wandering or where their attention needs to be. You can change the way you think, and once you do, your game and your life will improve. And we need to just remind our kids of that all these small, seemingly insignificant things can add up to major change agents if we pay attention to them. So sitting and thinking about our breathing for 2 minutes can help us be a better focuser, if that's even a verb, right? Or a thing, a noun, I guess. It can help us be a better performer if we can do these little tiny things to make us better. Simple actions can produce huge results. And there's no such thing as a truly difficult task, only one that's unpracticed. So if we don't practice getting better at our focus, we will not be focused. It's that simple. You know that as a coach, you know that in every little skill that you teach. And this is one that you can have some control over. It's just probably one we don't think about a whole lot necessarily, but it is truly something that can help our athletes get away from all the COVID, get away from all the rules that are going to be implemented on campus when they get back. And we can get them to sort of think about where